طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So infection control again. Let's repeat this point. Infection control is a scientific approach and practical approach according to WHO definition with practical, scientific and practical approach designed to prevent harming or diseases or pathogenesis that caused by infections. وزي ما قلنا infections can be caused by different types of microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, parasites or fungi, to patients and healthcare workers, and we can also add communities. It's grounded from the principles of infectious diseases اللي هو مين اللي احنا بندرسه في الميديكال مايكروبيولوجي او pharmaceutical microbiology, الepidemiology, and different social sciences and healthcare and health system strengthening like healthcare administration and so on. It's targeting or based on the patient safety. This is the main target, and health service quality and the quality of the service that offered by the healthcare facility. Anybody, everyone is vulnerable or liable to get any infection, any type of infection. So it's very important to prevent these infections in all levels, in the healthcare workers, in the within the elderly, within the inpatient, outpatients, infants, childs, everybody. So what is the target or the objective of infection control and prevention and control procedures? It's first of all to protect yourself against different infections. Some of these infections can be fatal and destructive. Protect your patient, and this is our goal, and protect your family and community. Usually, while talking about infection control prevention procedures, we have to talk somewhat about healthcare epidemiology. نتكلم دايما على الابيديميولوجي الخاصه بالهيلث كير فاسيلتي اللي احنا نقصد بيها لما نيجي نقول هيلث كير فاسيلتيز. بنتكلم على المستشفيات، الهوسبيتالز، بوليكلينكس، الاوت بيشنت، even الفارماسي، وحتى ايضا ممكن we can يعني talk about also الهوم كير او هوم هيلث كير، الرعايه الصحيه تقدم في البيوت. دي كلها بنعتبرها health care facility. So healthcare epidemiology can be defined as the study of the occurrence, okay, prevalence, determinants and distribution of health and disease within healthcare settings. And again, healthcare settings called for different settings like the hospitals, outpatients, clinics, and even home care facility. The community acquired infections are those infections that present or incubated at the time of hospital admission. طبعا here is some confusing about hospital acquired or healthcare acquired infections. خلينا نقول healthcare أحسن، يعني أوسع من hospital acquired. And community acquired infections. Sometimes the patient admitted to the hospital with some infections, which is by mistaken called hospital acquired, or even after admission to the hospital directly immediately ونيجي نقول عليه برضه hospital acquired. This is wrong. We can define community acquired infections those infections that present already or incubated or incubating, with incubation period range from 1 day to up to 1 month. Okay, at the time of hospital admission. يعني المريض already came to the hospital with an infection or in the incubation time of the infection. But on the other hand, we can define the infections which is described as healthcare acquired infections أو hospital acquired infections. وقلنا نوسع المجال شوية بتاعنا، هنقول healthcare acquired infections. Those infections that erupt تبدأ تظهر على المريض within 14 days of hospital discharge. يعني بعد ما يخرج من المستشفى. And this is by mistake called for community acquired. طب هو مش جوه المستشفى وظهر عليه أعراض الانفكشن، مع إنه من 14 يوم أو within 14 days he was in the hospital. في الحالة دي ما بقولش عليه community acquired، بنقول عليه healthcare acquired infection. This is very important to differentiate, to understand. Some infections described as iatrogenic infections, those resulting from medical or surgical treatment. يعني تحديدا السيرجيكال أو الميديكيشنز like immune suppressive and so on. Those are infections that caused by a surgeon or any other physicians or even the staff of the healthcare. This is called also iatrogenic infection. هنا بنطلع معانا الانفكشن that contracted by environment, for example, or by food or by visitors. Here it is confined only in surgeon or medical staff. طبعا healthcare acquired infections, one of the very huge problem that are facing governments. على سبيل المثال عندنا في United States عندنا 5% من ال patients developing health acquired infection, which is actually very high percentage. وفي إحصائية تانية بتتكلم عن تكاليف باهظة الثمن على بعض الدول بالنسبة ل health acquired infections. على سبيل المثال في United Kingdom ال health acquired infections أو ال hospital acquired infections بتكلف الحكومة more than 2 billion pounds، أكثر من 2 مليار جنيه استرليني بتكلف الحكومة البريطانية طبعا تبعات هذا النوع من الانفكشن. So it is highly problematic على المستوى يعني الاقتصادي، على مستوى صحة الدولة كلها إلى آخره. Although some of the pathogens that cause health acquired infections originate in the external environment، في الغالب بيكون الانفكشن أو الانفكشوس ايجنت الباثوجين الميكروب جاي من خارج المستشفى from the external environment, but also in the other hand many coming from patients themselves اللي احنا بنسميه patient microbiota أو indigenous microbiota أو flora that enter a surgical incision, and this is one of the risk factor, surgery, or gain entrance to areas of the body other than those there are normally reside. For example عندنا urinary tract infection وبتحتل يعني مراكز عالية في أنواع الانفكشنز اللي بتحصل داخل المستشفى. Urinary tract infections, GI infections, any portal of interest that can be a way or a method for transmission of different types of pathogens. We have a very problematic economic issue هنا. مثلا على سبيل المثال في United States تكلف أو عدد ال patients كان million 1.7 million patients due to health acquired infections. Mortality rate was about 6%, which is equal to about 100,000 patients die. 35% die from hospital acquired pneumonia. تحديدا النيمونيا من أخطر أو the most dangerous infection caused by healthcare facilities, and the mortality rate is very high due to healthcare acquired pneumonia about 35%. عندنا عدد من الباثوجنز mostly bacteria are involved in the health acquired infections. And 70% of these pathogens, about 70% of these pathogens, drug resistant or antibiotic resistant bacteria. بيحتل المركز الأول عندنا الستاف أوريوس about 15%. CNS اللي احنا بنسميها coagulase negative staph also about 15%. يعني احنا عندنا هنا 30% ستاف نصهم ميرسا أو الستافيلوكوكس أوريوس. طبعا وده منطقي يعني very logic because you know it's not easy to avoid touching the patient. الستاف زي ما احنا عارفين normally present in the on our skin, so it's easy to transfer from patient to patient, from staff to patient, from visitors to patients and so on. عندنا بعد كده يجي في يعتبر في الثيرد رانك عندنا الانتيروكوكس species تحديدا الفانكومايسين resistant enterococci, and this is highly resistant or multi-drug resistant strain of enterococci, وده طبعا GI infection. Escherichia coli represent 10%, Pseudomonas aeruginosa، وده من أكثر الباثوجينز اللي احنا بنقابلها في خاصة في البيرن واردز. عندنا كمان الكليبسيلا which is respiratory and as well as GI infection. Enterobacter also GI infection. So those are the top 7 bacteria, antibiotic resistant, multi-antibiotic resistant bacteria that involved in different healthcare acquired infections. نفس الكلام برضو الفنجاي والفيروسز parasites also has a role, important role, and also they can be resistant against antifungal, antivirals, and antiparasites, and also can be involved in health acquired infections. As we know, we have for any infection, for any type of infection, a mode of transmission or several types of mode of transmission. والmode of transmission, understanding of mode of transmission can help us to prevent any infection. لما بنعرف ازاي ينتقل الديزيز we can control it. We have 3 main types or mode of transmission through the healthcare facility. الcontact سواء كان direct or indirect, droplets والairborne. And both droplets and airborne can be transmitted through respiratory tract, but the difference is the size of the particle of the nuclei. The nuclei of droplets لما نيجي نقول إن في droplets vehicle بيساعد في الترانسفير أو carrying the infectious agent، بيكون عندي حجم الدروبلتس diameter of أو approximate diameter of the droplets particles more than 5 micrometer. If less than 5 micrometer بيكون البارتيكل بتاعتي بيكون الدايمتر فيها less than 5 micrometer. So we called it airborne يعني can transfer for high distances. ممكن تعبر على انها يبقى حجمها صغير وتفضل معلقة في الهواء لفترة طويلة وتمشي في الهواء تمشي مسافات بعيدة. Droplets because of its high size and weight, so it is not sustained in the air for a long time, and also the distance that transfer through it is not so far. هنا الحجم بيفرق معايا وبيفرق برضو في الديستنس وفي فترة بقائها معلقة في الهواء. الاثنين بيكون عندنا من خلال respiratory tract أو rarely بيكون عندنا أيضا من خلال ال sexual tract أو ال urinary tract بالنسبة للدروبلتس. We have common types of health acquired infections or common infections that usually occurs within the hospitals or within healthcare facilities. عندنا اللي بيحتل المركز أول urinary tract infections as we mentioned now. المورتاليتي فيها almost 13%. Surgical site infections, those infections caused by surgery, by deep wounds due to the surgery, and usually referred to post-surgical wounds, which represent 22% and mortality 8%. بعد كده عندنا lower respiratory tract infection. بنتكلم عن lower, not the upper respiratory tract infections, mainly in pneumonia. وزي ما قلنا من شوية النمونيا ممكن المورتاليتي ريت توصل فيها 35 إلى 36%. bloodstream infections due to injections, contaminated injections due to transfer of blood transfusion, sharps accidents, and so on represent about 14%, and mortality rate تعتبر أعلى mortality rate بعد النمونيا 31%, and mainly manifested in form of septicemia infection. And this is can caused by different types of antibiotic resistant bacteria. Also, among common infections that usually occurs especially due to using of long-term antibiotic treatment. عندنا المريض كتير بيتعرض لفترة طويلة من العلاج بالانتيبيوتكس، وبالتالي بيظهر بعض الانفكشنز اللي هي related للانتيبيوتكس زي الكلوستريديوم ديفيسيلي اللي بتسبب الكولايتس أو pseudomembranous colitis. And also zoonotic disease can also occurs في health acquired infections في حالة accidental existence of some animals or some even arthropods. زي ما احنا عارفين بعض الزونوتيك diseases ممكن تنتقل من خلال الارثروبودز لو مفيش اهتمام داخل المستشفى بمكافحة الارثروبودز، بعض الحشرات أو بعض الكائنات المتطفلة اللي ممكن تنقل some zoonotic diseases. For example عندنا for example طبعا عندنا الستيريوسيس عبارة عن zoonotic disease. عندنا الريكتسيا يعتبر zoonotic disease بينتقل من خلال بعض الفيكتورز الارثروبودز. فالزونوتيك disease also can occur and can be considered as health acquired infections. طيب, why patients are liable to health acquired infections and who patients more liable to health acquired infections? Those patients with suppressed due to drugs, due to underlying conditions like cancer. يبقى احنا عندنا patients وكثير من patients في inside the hospitals, especially admitted patients, usually suffering from compromising immunity system. The elderly patients also suffering from the same problem and other health conditions and health problems. Some elderly patients طبعا suffering from chronic diseases like diabetes, like coronary heart diseases, immune system problems, and so on. Women in labor and delivery, premature and newborns, also they are suffering from incomplete immune system. Surgical procedures, burns. طبعا البيرن patient فقد first line of immunity. زي ما احنا عارفين first line of immunity عندنا mainly السكين. البيرن patient لما بيفقد السكين بيفقد جزء كبير جدا من المناعة. diabetics أو diabetic patients, cancer patients, paralyzed, transplant patients, all of these patients are more liable to infections within the hospitals. We have three main causes, and other causes also can lead to health acquired infections. زي ما قلنا في الأول خالص antibiotic resistant bacteria وده very common in hospitals because as we know, the environment of hospital is very good environment for growing of such bacteria, antibiotic resistant bacteria, because of long use of antibiotics, vulnerable patients with compromised immunity, and also immune suppressant drugs, surgery, stress, and so on. All of these factors, good or good condition, good environment to incubate antibiotic resistant bacteria. The failure of health, and this is very important factor or limiting factor regarding to us, because the limiting factor is you yourself. Here we can prevent this factor, the failure of healthcare personnel to follow infection control guidelines. So by following or adherence of infection control guidelines, we will prevent almost 50% of healthcare acquired infections. احنا هنقدر نمنع كمية كبيرة جدا من الانفكشنز ونخفض النفقات ونحمي انفسنا. Okay, protect ourselves, protect our community, protect our families by adhering to infection control guidelines. And this is one of the main factors that lead to health acquired infections. Also increased number of immunocompromised patients، زي ما قلنا أسباب كتيرة للمرضى داخل المستشفى. So the primary way and the factor that we can control it to reduce the number of health acquired infections is strict and adherence, compliance of the infection control guidelines. This is the main factor and the controllable factor. This is in our hands. We can control this. You cannot control the immunocompromised patients. You cannot control, or not easy to control, the existence of resistant bacteria. But you can control the compliance with infection control guidelines. You can adhere. It's not difficult to adhere to the infection control guidelines. Actually, it is skills. It can be gained. It's not difficult. مش من الصعب أبدا إن إحنا نكتسب العادات دي وتكون الروتين اليومي بالنسبة لنا. طيب. One of the most important factor of the infection control guidelines is hand hygiene. And according to several reports and studies, hand hygiene can prevent حد فاكر النسبة قبل ما نكتبها؟ Can prevent how many percentage of hand hygiene، تخيل معايا، of infections can be prevented by hand hygiene. ادوني رقم كده لو بالصوت عشان
60 to 70%.
70
60 to 70.
60 to 70. في حد عنده
85
80
85 دكتور
85. مين تاني؟ حد عنده رأي تاني؟ مش أرقام كبيرة دي؟
ممكن 65 دكتور.
65 رقم كبير؟
يعني يعتبر أيوة بصراحة.
كبير صح؟ 65 كتير. من مجرد بس الهاند هايجين، يعني للدرجة دي بالبساطة دي؟
around 30 يا دكتور.
30. لو 30 كويس صح؟
around 30
يعني طب ده ايه رأيكم؟ 30 ده كويس؟ 30 40 كويس؟
99. more than
قليل.
99.
اوف 99 ما شاء الله. خلاص يبقى احنا نمنع اي حاجة تانية ونشتغل على الهاند هايجين بس.
دكتور هي نسبة كبيرة.
50%.
هي نسبة كبيرة دكتور، خاصة إنه إحنا عندنا هنا يعني متعارف إنه السلام باليد ومصافحة ومدري إيش كت فلازم إنه تكون نسبة كبيرة، بس ما أتوقع لدرجة عالية إنه 99 أو شيء زي كذا.
طيب هي زي ما انتم شايفين كده مشاركاتكم كلها ممتازة، لكن number of studies بتتكلم عن 80% okay decrease in the infections by just adherence to hand hygiene من ضمنها الهاند washing. يعني احنا كنا مستكترين دلوقتي مثلا 30-40%، لكن actually it is 80% decrease in the infections or health acquired infections by only adhering to hand washing أو hand hygiene. Okay, so this is very important. لازم نهتم جدا بالموضوع ده. We have to know the proper way for hand hygiene. We have to know the proper way for hand washing. Okay, طبعا بالإضافة للوسائل الأخرى أو الانفكشن كنترول ميجرز والبريكوشنز اللي احنا بنطبقها في حياتنا اليومية أو في المستشفى. So best way to prevent the spread of germs in healthcare settings and community زي ما قلنا ممكن توصل النسبة 80% infection decrease. Our hands are main tool to work. زي ما قال طلال أعتقد من شوية، قال إن إحنا يعني إيدينا بنستخدمها في كل حاجة. طبعا بغض النظر عن منع المصافحة والكلام ده، ده طبيعي في المستشفى إن إحنا بنمنع المصافحة يعني، لكن إحنا بنتكلم على التولز اللي أنت بتستخدمها يعني 24 hours. Your hands. So they are the key link in the chain of infection transmission. Okay. طيب WHO recommends 5 moments that you have to do hand washing or hand rubbing or hand hygiene. عندنا must، عندنا حالات you have to do hand hygiene after or before these points or these moments. Before touching a patient, before cleaning or aseptic procedures, after body fluid exposure risk, even though you have exposed or not exposed, but just ان انت يعني تعرضت للفلويد, after touching the patient and after touching patient surroundings. So patient surroundings, any surface surround the patient like tables, like tools, linens, and so on. So how to do hand hygiene? We have 2 procedures to do perfect hand hygiene: hand rubbing and hand washing. Hand rubbing usually called for using of alcohol-based antiseptics or disinfectants, either gel or solution, whatever. And hand washing اللي هو washing of hands by ordinary methods by using water and soap. It's not necessary to use medical soaps or Dettol soaps. You can use the ordinary soap. Okay, so عايزين نقف هنا شوية بس عشان الهاند washing والهاند rubbing, some of even medical staff, even physicians are doing it in a wrong way. So this is very important to know hand rubbing and hand washing. الاثنين almost the same. هيفرق معايا عشان بستخدم المية في الهاند washing، بيفرق معايا في الدراينج. So we will add drying steps. So first of all, we have to do, in order to do the proper hygiene, hand hygiene, rubbing or washing, we have to consume the proper period of time, not less than 20 seconds to do hand rubbing and not less than 40 seconds to do hand washing. في الهاند rubbing لما نستخدم الانتيسeptic alcohol, first of all apply a proper quantity on one of your palms and then rubbing in circular way. هوريكم فيديو دلوقتي برضه عشان يكون in applied form يكون أوضح. Palm to palm rubbing in circular form بشكل دائري، راحة اليد راحة اليد. Then hand to hand rubbing and interlocking the fingers, okay, and also interlocking the fingers palm to palm and hand to hand. And then the fifth step is rubbing the hands in, or rubbing the nails in your palms. ناخد النيلز ونعملها rubbing up and down في palms. Then left and right thumbs should be also rubbed within the palms. And finally, we'll do circular nail movement within or on the palms. And this is the procedures of hand rubbing. بالنسبة للهاند washing نستخدم طبعا water and soap. First of all, open the faucet of tap, then apply soap by the same manner. نعمل hand to hand rubbing in circular manner, and also palm to palm and hand to hand interlocking fingers, and also round rubbing of the nails, rubbing of left and right thumbs, and finally round rubbing in the palms by your nails, and then wash your hand by tap water, which is usually should not be hot, very hot or very cold. It can be warm water, it's better. And finally, dry your hands by either clean towels or sterile tissues. Then discard these tissues and finally dry. Your hand will be ready for safe use. هنوريكم فيديو الآن for proper hand washing, and this is very important. يعني لو طلعنا من المحاضرة بالproper technique for hand rubbing and hand washing دي تبقى مكسب كويس قوي. طيب let's see another. هنوريكم دلوقتي another video. طيب هنلاحظ هنا أول حاجة حطينا الألكول بيز جل، وبعدين زي ما قلنا في الأول بنعمل حركة دائرية palm to palm، حركة دائرية، وبعدين hand to hand interlocking your fingers، بنعمل الأصابع بينها وبين بعضها في في in hands and palms، يعني في بطن الإيد وفي ظهر الإيد. هنا برضو بنعمل back fingers to opposing palms with fingers interlocking. بعدين يعني بنعمل rubbing للثامس لوحدها، اوكي left and right. بنعمل حركة دائرية للنيلز في البالمز اليمين والشمال زي ما احنا شايفين. That's it. It should take about 20, not less than 20 seconds to 30 seconds. Okay. في شوية precautions برضو احنا يعني ننبه عليها during hand washing. طبعا and some also mistakes usually يعني done by even medical staff. You have to avoid to touch the sink. This is very important. حاول ان انت تبعد عن السink and usually sinks are contaminated. Water should not be very hot or very cold, and hands should be wet before applying the soap. برضه ما نحطش الصوب قبل ما يكون ايدينا فيها كمية من المية to avoid cracking of the skin. A good lather is need to reach all surfaces. لازم نعمل رغوة. Scrubbing is necessary to dislodge microorganisms. السكرابنج اللي احنا شفناها سواء بالنيلز او الحركة الدائرية الى اخره. It's very important to remove microorganisms that adhere to different surfaces. Okay. طيب. Friction helps loosen dead skin, dirt, debris, and microorganisms. Rinsing of hands should be downwards. لازم ايديها تكون لتحت not upwards. ما تكونش مرفوعة لفوق. ليه؟ لأن الcontaminants أو الووش هينزل على ايديا من تحت ويعمل لي contamination. So rinsing should be downward. My hands should be downwards towards sinks, and hands must be dried after finishing. Clean hands should not touch the faucet of the tap. لما اجي اقفل الحنفيه ما اقفلهاش بايديا النظيفه طبعا، نقفلها ممكن by our elbows بالكوع، او اذا كانت IR بيكون افضل، او ممكن نستخدم tissue or towels to close it. Okay, these the main precautions بالنسبه للهاند washing and hand rubbing. Okay. طيب. Why we are doing the infection control procedures, or what is the idea? ايه هي الفكرة في infection control? Infection control procedures, any procedures that we will discuss inshallah, is for break down various links of the chain of infection. يعني انا عندي حاجة اسمها infection chain هنتكلم عنها دلوقتي حالا. Any breakdown or any actions that taken to avoid continuous chain of infection of these 6 elements is the main target of infection control procedure. بقى احنا كل الانفكشن كنترول بروسيجر عندنا بيتركز على، او اي infection control بيركز على ان how to break down one of these chains. اوكي. طيب طبعا كلنا درسنا وعرفنا قبل كده في المايكرو، طبعا اتكلمنا عنها كتير، الانفكشن تشين. infection chain are 6 elements. These elements should be connected with each other to complete the infection cycle. عشان الانفكشن تحصل لابد يبقى في ترابط connection between these items. The organism, infectious agent اللي هو البكتيريا او الفيروس او البارازيت whatever, and we can break down this chain by using of antibiotic. صح؟ بالنسبة للبكتيريا الانفكشنز او antiviral or whatever. طيب الorganism usually need for reservoir to store on it, to multiply, to nourish. This is called a reservoir. Reservoir could be or can be a human body, can be an animal. And there are طبعا number of reservoirs, animals, humans. It can be mechanical reservoir, can be biological reservoir. فالمكان اللي هيحصل فيه multiplication للاجنت infectious agent بنسميه reservoir. طيب, in order to go outside the reservoir, it should be an portal of exit or escape. لازم يخرج من الريزرفوار. And the portal of exit can be a respiratory, can be a GI, can be sexual, or whatever. So we can break down reservoir by killing of the reservoir. إذا كان reservoir عند الانيمال على سبيل المثال في حالات زي البليج reservoir بيكون rodents. لو قتلنا rodents كده احنا كسرنا التشين of plague. For example, عندنا الملاريا reservoir of malaria of plasmodium malaria هو المosquitoes. So one of the infection control of malaria to control mosquitoes. طيب البورتال of exit. Portal of exit can be droplets, airborne. يبقى عندنا precautions of airborne, precautions of droplets to avoid going outside the reservoir بالنسبة لي infectious agent. طيب الانفكشوس agent طلع من الريزرفوار وماشي عايز يروح الهوست. عشان ينتقل للهوست it should do some procedures or some process ده اللي احنا بنسميه mode of transmission اللي هي طريقة الانتقال، خروجه من الريزرفوار وانتقاله إلى الهوست. transfer to the host through a specific mode of transmission. ممكن يكون من خلال droplets، ممكن يكون من خلال for example food transmission, waterborne, foodborne, bloodborne. So the mode of transmission, the way that transfer used by the infectious agent to transfer from the reservoir to the host. And before entering the host should liable to the infectious agent by offering a portal of entry. Portal of entry, as we mentioned in the portal of exit in the reservoir, if the reservoir is human, the portal of entry will be the same also, like respiratory, like GI, like sexual, like urinary, and so on. عشان يدخل في الهوست. عندنا الهوست itself, also one of the infection chain. If there is no host, no infection. So we can also play on this factor by using some medications, boosting the immune system, and so on. So all of these items, 6 items, اللي احنا بنسميها items of chain of infection. The idea of infection control, and this is very simple. The idea of infection control إن احنا to break down one of these chains or control one either or all of these chains. أي طريقة عندنا هتكسر لنا واحدة من التشينز الستة في الانفكشن, we can prevent the infection. We have different هنعدي عليها سريعا different يعني terminologies. For example, عندنا medical asepsis is a clean technique used to exclude pathogens, any pathogens, not all organisms, but only pathogens. So the medical aseptic techniques include frequent and thorough hand washing, personal hygiene, wearing clean mask. ناخد بالنا من clean, not sterile, because we are talking about excluding pathogens, not all organisms. So we can use clean masks, gloves, gowns, proper cleaning of supplies and equipment, disinfection by different disinfectants, proper disposal of needles, contaminated materials, and finally sterilization of different tools and surfaces. لما نيجي نتكلم على more strict procedures ده اللي احنا بنسميه surgical asepsis. It's a sterile technique. It means that excluding all microbes بدل ما نقول all pathogens بنقول all microbes يعني سواء كان pathogens or non-pathogens. So we have to use sterile masks, not clean masks. فعندي الكرايتيريا هنا أعلى. Clean, not clean, sterile gloves, sterile caps, sterile gowns, and so on. Surgical scrubbing of hands and fingernails before entering the operating room. زي ما شفنا من شوية scrubbing for ordinary hand washing lasts for about at least 20 seconds or 40 seconds بالنسبة للهاند washing. هنا في surgical scrubbing it can last at least 2 minutes when عندي surgical scrubbing, and this is not our يعني concern now, but it's different, it more restrict, it needs more time, deeper scrubbing and washing using sterile solutions and dressings, using sterile drapes. كل حاجة عندنا هنا هتبقى sterile using heat sterilized surgical instruments. طيب عندنا precautions أو criteria و procedures بنسميها ال standard precautions, standard infection control precautions, and these precautions are applied in all conditions. واحنا هنا بنقول على ال standard precautions those precautions that apply to the care of all patients without exclusion in all healthcare settings, even in the offices, regardless of suspected or confirmed presence of pathogen. So هنا احنا بنعمل estimation أو expect in all people within the hospitals are a source of infection. أي حد بتقابله سواء كان ليه علاقة بالميديكال ستاف أو ملوش علاقة، ليه علاقة بالبيشنت أو ملوش علاقة، إن هو source of infection. This is very important. هنا بنطبق فيها حاجة اسمها standard precautions. Okay? And standard precautions for infection control constitutes the primary strategy for the prevention of healthcare associated transmission of infectious agents among patients and healthcare personnel and even visitors, any person within the hospitals. Standard precautions طبعا تشمل عدد من precautions. زي ما قلنا مرة تانية standard precautions it means that we have to apply them at any conditions. We consider all patients and all persons and applied within all places within the healthcare facility. And we assume that every person is potentially infected or colonized with an organism that could be transmitted in the healthcare settings. طبعا infected or colonized it can be used interchangeably, but the infection is the same as colonization, but infection is accompanied with a symptom signs and symptoms of the disease. يبقى سواء تواجد just existence or colonization of organism or existence of the organism with some symptoms, we have to assume there is a colonization and there is an infection في كل الأحوال وفي كل الناس الموجودة داخل المستشفى. First of all, hand hygiene. زي ما قلنا, we have to do proper hand hygiene and avoid unnecessary touching surfaces in close proximity to the patient. When hands are visibly dirty, contaminated with proteinaceous materials or organic materials or fluids, visibly soiled with blood, body fluids, wash hands with soap and water. If hands are not visibly soiled, or after removing visible materials with soap and water, decontaminate your hands with an alcohol-based hand rubbing. Alternatively, hands may be washed with an antimicrobial soap and water. لو ما لقيناش اللي هو alcohol-based hand rub. طيب امتى نعمل performing الهاند hygiene زي ما قلنا من شويه ال 5 moments اللي اتكلمنا عنهم before and after touching the patient after touching patient surrounding after risk exposure of patient fluids. Okay, and these are the moments or 5 moments of according to the recommendation of WHO. طيب using regarding or among the standard precautions the using personal protective equipment أو اللي احنا بنسميه PPE. We have to wear PPE when the nature of the anticipated patient's interaction indicates that contact with blood or body fluids may occur. لو في أي احتمالية إن أنا هتعرض للpatient body fluids before leaving the patient room or cubicle, remove and discard PPE. This is very important. طبعا unfortunately بنلاحظ من الممارسات الخاطئة إن الميديكال ستاف أو الفيزيشن use the PPE for several patients. It's wrong, totally wrong. It should be used for one patient and removed before leaving the room. And even though we have to use different gloves in case of inspection of different places or different body sections in the same patient, this is very important. طيب, wear gloves when contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials, mucous membranes, non-intact skin, or potentially contaminated intact skin. Remove gloves after contact with patients or surrounding environment using proper technique to prevent hand contamination. Don't wear, this is very important, يا شباب. This is very important. Don't wear the same pair of gloves for the care of more than one patient. Change gloves during patient care if the hands will move from contaminated body side. For example, يعني for example, preanal areas, okay? And it's not logic even to use it in the face, for example, or the body cavities, other body cavities. Like using of gowns, when we have to use or wear gowns, we have to wear gowns to protect your skin and prevent soiling or contamination of clothing during procedures and patient care activities, or facing body fluids, secretions, and so on. Wear gowns for direct patient contact if patients has uncontained secretions or excretions, like emesis, for example, bleeding, and so on. Remove gown and perform hand hygiene before leaving patient's environment. This is very important. Also, mouth and nose with eye protection should be applied if there is likely to generate splashes or sprays of blood, body fluid, secretions, and excretions. Also, we have to use it during aerosol generating procedures. طيب, بالنسبة عندنا للرespiratory hygiene and cough etiquette, we have what's called cough etiquette, respiratory hygiene, to avoid أثناء during عملية sneezing أو coughing. As we know, we have to use a clean tissue or towels. Don't sneeze or cough in front of others. Educate healthcare personnel to contain respiratory secretions to prevent droplets and foment transmission of respiratory pathogens, especially during seasonal outbreaks of respiratory virus tract or even within these days في البانديميك اللي احنا فيه. Offer masks for coughing patients and other symptomatic persons. طيب, عندنا patient care equipment instruments also regarding to standard precautions. You have to wear PPE according to the level of anticipated contamination بالنسبة لاستخدام بعض instruments devices. طيب, textiles and laundry. Handle textiles, fabrics, and other laundry with minimum agitation to avoid contamination of air, surface, and persons. يعني one of the mistakes, also common mistakes بالنسبة لل caregivers or النيرسز ان هو بيستخدموا او بيقوموا يعني بيعملوا shaking linens which help the distribution of different infectious agents. الكلام ده اللي احنا اتكلمنا عنه هو الستاندرد precautions، وزي ما قلنا بنطبقه في كل الاحوال و assuming all persons, all people within the hospital is a source of contamination, a source of infection, a source of colonization. طيب one of the precautions أو important precautions بالنسبة للعاملين أو health care workers vaccination. Vaccination should be done for the following disease: hepatitis, الانفلونزا، MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, والvaricella, chickenpox, DBT, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, و meningococcal vaccine أو meningitis. We have a specific طبعا topic اللي هو antimicrobial antibiotic resistance. In order to avoid or decrease the risk of antimicrobial resistance among hospitalized patients, we have to use vaccines, specific vaccines against, for example, TB or other dangerous infections. Get catheter out. Don't leave catheters more than 24 hours or maximum 48 hours. Target the pathogen by using the proper antibiotic according to the culture. Access the experts, practice antimicrobial control, use local data, treat infection, not contamination. And this is very important. Treatment of infection, not contamination. And this can be done by doing a culture, not by doing empirical antibiotic. Treat infection, not colonization. Also, we have to treat the real infection, not the colonizing organism. Know when to say no to vancomycin. Vancomycin is not all the time, as we know, in all hospitals, unfortunately, للأسف. Stop antimicrobial treatment, isolate the pathogen, break the chain of contact. طيب ال PPE زي ما قلنا اتكلمنا عنها، اللي هي ال Personal Protective Equipment. دي من أهم الوسائل اللي ممكن نستخدمها في ال Standard Precautions like ال gloves والماسكس والجاونز. هنتكلم how to do donning of personal protective equipment and doffing and donning. إن شاء الله هنتكلم عنها ونقول عليها دلوقتي. ناخد مقطع برضو سريع ازاي نستخدم ال different PPE. قبل بس ما ننتقل للنقطة دي، حد عنده سؤال أو تحبوا تاخدوا break up to you.
ايوه بريك دكتور لو سمحت.
طيب اوكي. دكتور رجب معانا؟
معاك يا دكتور.
اتفضل يا دكتور. تحبوا ناخد بريك؟
اللي حضرتك تشوفه هو برضه على حسب نشاطهم، بس المشكله انه بعد البريك بياخدوا وقت طويل على ما يتجمعوا. البريك خلينا نكون شارب علشان ما يحصلش تاخير. انت هتحتاج تقريبا ساعه ثانيه يا دكتور سامح؟
تقريبا ان شاء الله دكتور باذن الله.
طيب رجاء تاخدوا قد ايه؟ 10 دقائق يكفي شباب؟
او 5 حتى.
يس يس
خلاص يعني يعني دلوقتي الساعة 2:43.
52 دكتور.
3 ل 5 نبدأ إن شاء الله.
3 ل 5.
خلاص ماشي يا دكتور.
طيب
بس
طيب.
عشان ما يتأخروش بزيادة، وأنت
طيب
جزاك الله خير برضه عشان ما نعطلكش، عارفين إن عندك برضه كورس. الله يهديك.
الله يكرمك.
الله يجزاك.
ماشي يا دكتور. Equipment. But we will share a clip for proper wearing. Okay. هنا wearing gowns wearing face shield and mask. Face shield overhead. طيب احنا we have talked about the standard precautions قلنا اللي يتم تطبيقها في كل الأحوال و assuming all persons and all people inside the hospitals and everywhere is a source of contamination, a source of infection. نيجي بعد كده ل specific precautions يعني مرتبطة أكتر أو precautions more precautions ارتباطها أكتر بالحالة أو بالوضع بتاع المريض. If we are suspecting or expecting contact with the patients, we have to add contact precautions. So the contact transmission is the most important and frequent actually mode of transmission of health acquired infections. So in order to add to the standard precautions, these precautions بالنسبة للcontact يعني expected infections, we have to add some extra precautions. Regarding to visitors, we have to report to the nurse any visitors before entering. Donning gloves upon entry into the room and wear gloves whenever touching the patients, intact skin or surfaces, and articles in close proximity to the patient, any surrounding of the patient. Remove gloves before leaving the room. This is very important. Hand hygiene according to the standard precautions. زي ما اتكلمنا عن hand hygiene في standard precautions. The same also we have to do standard hand hygiene in the 5 moments that we have mentioned before. Gowns, wear gowns upon entry into the room. Remove the gowns and observe hand hygiene before leaving the patient care environment or the room. Patient transfer should be limited and ensure only, it's limited only just for medically necessary purposes, like doing array, X-ray, or something necessary to transfer patients from his or her room to another place. Ensure that infected or colonized areas of patient's body are contained and covered. Remove and dispose contaminated PPE and perform hand hygiene prior to transporting the patients, and wear clean PPE to handle the patients at the transport place. بالنسبة للpatient care equipment, you have to use disposable, not critical patient care equipment, or implement patient dedicated use of such equipment. طيب عندنا كمان extra precautions بالنسبة لل expected droplets transferred or transmitted infections. So as we mentioned, or different distinguish between droplets and airborne. Droplets, those particles or the vehicle of those particles more than 5 micrometer in diameter. The droplets precautions or extra precautions يعني adding to the standard precautions, investors should be reported. Personal protective equipment should be done and should be done a mask upon entry into the patient room. Hand hygiene like standard precautions. Patient placement if possible, cohort or maintain a spatial separation of 3 feet from other patients. كل مسافة بين patient في محيط دائري 3 feet. The private room is preferred for those patients. If not offered or not available, we can keep 2 or 3 patients with the same condition in the same room. Transportation should be prohibited unless there is a medical necessary. Wearing mask during the and following respiratory hygiene and cough etiquette during the transportation. No mask is required for persons transporting patients on droplets precautions. It's not necessary to wear بالنسبة للperson اللي هو هين الpatient. بالنسبة للairborne precautions for extra precautions on the standard precautions for patients or for infections transmitted in the particles less than 5 micrometers in diameter. The extra precautions also this should be reported. Use airborne precautions, the same airborne precautions for patients known or suspected to be infected with infectious agents transmitted person to person by the airborne route. For example, tuberculosis, measles, chickenpox, and for a period of time in closed area, COVID-19. The patient placement should be placed in AIR, air infection isolation room. وطبعا هنا air infection isolation room differs بالنسبة to those patients with dangerous and infectious and highly infectious diseases like tuberculosis. It should be kept, the patient should be kept in negative pressure AIR. In patients, those patients with immunocompromisation or immune disease conditions should be kept in the positive pressure rooms, isolation rooms. طبعا negative الهواء بيدخل داخل الغرفة والبوزيتيف بيخرج خارج الغرفة. Transportation also the same precautions like droplets, limiting transportation unless there is a necessary transportation, using a surgical mask بالنسبة للpatient. Hand hygiene the same as standard precautions, and PPE should be worn during handling with the patient. طيب احنا اتكلمنا عن الغرفة أو غرفة العزل بتكون negative pressure for patients who require airborne precautions and who with dangerous infections أو highly contagious infections. والغرفة بتكون معزولة أو protected by HEPA filters, high efficient performance particulate air filters اللي بتفلتر الهواء من الفيروسز والبكتيريا. Patients who are especially vulnerable to infection اللي هم immunocompromised patients under immunosuppressant drugs should be placed in the protective environment under positive pressure. برضه الرooms بتكون ال air that enters the rooms should be filtered by HEPA filter. طيب كده احنا اتكلمنا generally على الانفكشن كنترول. كل procedures اتكلمنا عنها can be applied in different conditions according to the type of infection in all health facility on all healthcare facilities، سواء كان داخل المستشفى او الكلينكس او زي ما قلنا برضو في العنايه المنزليه والرعايه الصحيه اللي بتقدم في المنازل. هنتكلم دلوقتي عن يعني contemporary issue، عن موضوع لازم نتكلم عنه بما ان احنا بنتكلم عن infection control، وهو موضوع الساعة، موضوع يعني حديث الساعة حاليا، ويعني it's actually the one of the most important issue or medical issue that should be discussed regarding to infection control اللي هو COVID-19 أو pandemic of coronavirus in current days. في number of precautions أو extra precautions هنتكلم عنها إن شاء الله، number of recommendations من طبعا من أحد المصادر الأساسية اللي هي WHO، وهي أحد المؤسسات المعنية طبعا أو المؤسسة الرئيسية المعنية على مستوى العالم في يعني متابعة الابيديميكس والبانديميكس وتوجيه المؤسسات الصحية والوزارات الصحة المختلفة بكيفية التعامل مع البانديميك. First of all, we'll get some brief aspects and insights of some epidemiological factors and definitions and symptoms of COVID-19. Coronaviruses are a large family of viruses, as we know, that cause a wide range of illness from common cold to more severe disease. طبعا corona it is not the first time that cause some diseases or infections. Before in about 2012 it emerged in Saudi Arabia in the form of Middle East respiratory syndrome اللي هو MERS, and also it was emerged في 2003 2003 and 2002 severe acute respiratory syndrome أو SARS. في آخر 2019 ظهر السترين الجديد اللي هو النوفل كورونا فيروس أو NCOV أو SARS-CoV-2 which was a new strain and not been previously identified in humans, and it believed that transferred from animals, mainly bats and snakes, from animals to humans. The SARS-CoV-2 was identified as coronavirus strain responsible for causing COVID-19 disease. ما احنا عندنا عشان بس نفرق ما بين الديزيز اللي هو احنا بنسميه او اطلقت عليه WHO COVID-19 والinfectious agent هو SARS-CoV-2 one of the strains of coronavirus. Incubation period of coronavirus range from 1 day to 14 days or about 13 days, and the average between 5 to 6 days. More information is needed to determine whether transmission can occur from asymptomatic individuals or during the incubation period. طبعا الكلام ده حصل له updating امبارح بس أو sorry yesterday they announced that there is no clear evidence that asymptomatic patient can infect the infection to other people. This is very important. يبقى الكلام ده حصل له updating بس من يومين. Modes of transmission: droplets sprayed by affected individuals, contact with patients, respiratory secretions, contaminated surfaces and equipment. Actually, there is no evidence of other mode of transmission like blood or any other mode of transmission like food, for example. The only evidence is about direct contact in the respiratory secretion, contaminated surfaces, and direct contact with contaminated surfaces and equipment, with direct contact by droplets with the affected individuals. Transmission from animals also reported, and human to human. Actually, up to now, there is no vaccination no treatment. أنا بتكلم بغض النظر إذا كان في trials أو لا. في trials yes, but there is no final results. Only supportive treatment is available. يبقى المين mode of transmission of COVID-19 through droplets, as we mentioned, the particles that more than 5 micrometer in diameter can be generated when an infected person coughs or sneezes. Any person who is in the close in contact about 1 meter with someone who has respiratory symptoms like coughing or sneezing is at risk of having at their mouth and noses or even conjunctiva. عشان كده برضو بنحذر الناس ان احنا avoid to touch your eyes to the droplets. طيب the second way for mode of transmission, the second mode of transmission, contact, usually direct or indirect contact. Direct contact with people by talking, coughing, sneezing, and so on, or indirect contact by surfaces or vomits or objectives, الأدوات الشخصية أو الأدوات الأخرى اللي بتستخدم زي داخل المستشفى like stethoscope or thermometers or medical devices, other medical devices, and so on. Droplets may land on surfaces and virus can remain for long time. Sometimes, some articles talked about more than 9 days survival of viruses or some surface. طبعا السيرفيسز variable with each other within each other. يعني مش كل السيرفيسز بيبقى persistent عليه لفترة طويلة. أقل سيرفيس بيبقى عليه الفيروس هو الكبر أو النحاس، وأكثر سيرفيس ممكن يبقى لفترة طويلة هو البلاستيكس أو different types of plastics. الايربورن ترانسميشن كان عليه ديبيت كتير كان في كلام كتيره يعني ابحاث كتيره اتكلمت عنه. mainly limiting in certain instances and healthcare settings in which airborne transmitted are performed and tracheal intubation, non-invasive ventilation, tracheotomy, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, manual ventilation before intubation and bronchoscopy. These circumstances actually هو اللي حصل فيها reporting لل-airborne transmission, but some studies have shown that detection of COVID-19 RNA in air samples. طبعا كان في number of articles زي ما احنا شايفين كده يعني reported the existence of virus in the air. That means it can be airborne. طيب, we have to consider something in these articles. Detection of COVID-19 RNA was in extremely low concentrations. كانش العدد كبير وقد يكون غير كافي, not enough to do or to cause an infection. The detection of virus in air samples based on PCR-based assays, which is not indicative of variable viruses replication and infection competent viruses that could be transmissible and capable of sufficient inoculum to initiate invasive infections. For that reason, we still in debate بالنسبة لل-airborne transmission, but there is no doubt that droplets transmission is occurring, but airborne still في نقاش. لكن الاحتياط أو precautions إن احنا we have to consider airborne transmission. So the main mode of transmission: droplets, contact, direct or indirect, and airborne transmission. The infection prevention control of COVID-19 in the healthcare workers. The intended for healthcare workers responsible for infection control teams. These measures should be in place at all healthcare facilities and supported by the facility and national leadership. Strategies to prevent or limit transmission is through 4 different strategies هنقولها دلوقتي. يعني خلينا نتكلم عن strategies ونرجع تاني. We have 5 strategies for COVID-19 infection prevention control. الستاندرد precautions for all patients ده اتكلمنا عنه من شوية بالتفصيل. standard precautions for all patients اللي يتم تطبيقه على كل المرضى أو كل الناس داخل المستشفى. screening أو triage, early recognition and source control. additional transmission based precautions like airborne, administrative controls, environmental and engineering controls. دي اللي هي ال 5 standards for facing or infection prevention control of COVID-19 within the healthcare facility. طيب, first of all, we have to consider to avoid or to break down ال chain 6 chains اللي اتكلمنا عنها من شوية. We have to consider the physical distance to avoid droplets and airborne particles. So, physical distances is restrict the number can be done by applying the following procedures. Restrict the number of visitors to the healthcare center. Enforce a minimum 1 meter distance between staff. وده طبعا الكلام اللي بنطبقه برضه في يعني خارج المستشفى او في التجمعات العامه في الاسواق الى اخره. For staff or patient group activities ensure physical distancing. If not feasible, لو العدد كبير والمكان محدود, we have to cancel group activities like meetings and so on. For cafeteria settings, stagger meals to ensure physical distance is maintained between staff, or if not feasible, close dining halls. برضو لو مش متاح ان احنا نعمل physical distance او social distancing في الكافيتيرياز في restaurants, we have to close dining halls. كل واحد ياخد وجبته ويتوكل على الله. Require staff, visitors and employees to avoid unnecessary touching or sharing equipment like shaking hands and hugging. ده طبعا معروف. Okay, عندنا استخدام ال PPE, one of the important and essential strategy في ال prevention control of COVID. أول حاجة, we have to define our needs or to estimate our needs, either monthly based or weekly based. We have to determine PPE supply chain, نشوف المورد المناسب, and optimize PPE availability. This is very important strategies to optimize the availability of protective personal equipment. Why? Because we are in a crisis. لما تيجي الوقت تدور على personal protective equipment like gowns and masks, it's يعني very difficult to find a reliable supply chain. So in order to avoid the shortage, we have some key points. PPE extended use using or longer periods of time than normal according to standards. لو كان في الأوضاع الطبيعية احنا بنستخدم الماسks for half an hour or 1 hour, we can extend to the maximum standard, for example, 2 hours. Reprocessing followed by reuse after cleaning or decontamination sterilization for those reusable PPE or even disposable PPE. ده الكلام ده شفناه يمكن في الدول اللي حصل عندها crisis like Italy or Spain. لأن إن هم كانوا بيضطروا لإعادة استخدام ال one use PPE by decontamination or by sterilization. Considering alternative items compared with standards recommended by WHO, كان في عدد من ال alternatives اتكلمت عنها منظمة الصحة العالمية. وبرضه وزارة الصحة هنا اتكلمت عن اللي هو التكستيل ماسكس أو الكمامة القماشية وكيفية تصنيعها وغسلها مرة أخرى أو إعادة استخدامها. Each of these measures carries significant risks and limitations, considering only a last report when all other strategies for national and appropriate use and procurement of PPE that have been exhausted. Extended use of masks and or respirators. The use without removing for up to 6 hours when caring of a cohort of COVID-19 بالنسبة للبيشنت المعزولين. Regarding to reprocessing, it's not advised to use surgical masks. Surgical masks is not recommended. Possible for respirators using vapor or hydrogen peroxide, ethylene oxide for sterilization. طيب يعني in all conditions or under all circumstances we have to minimize the need of PPE, and this is by using different strategies. من أهمهم استخدام telemedicine. It's not necessary to come to the hospital or facing the patients. Minimize the need for visiting the healthcare facilities. Implement physical barriers. Limit the number of healthcare workers, those entering COVID-19 patients' room. Plan ahead what activities will be performed at beside to avoid multiple entries and exits. And finally, don't allow visitors where COVID-19 patients are isolated. Okay. طيب. Actually, we have the time is running. طيب. WHO provides advice to decision makers to apply risk-based approach and define when to use the mask. Number one, the purpose of mask to use. We have to define the purpose of mask or using of masks. Risk of exposure to the COVID-19 virus in the local context. Vulnerability of the person. Is he immune competent or immune compromised? The setting of the population lives in terms of population density, feasibility and or availability and the cost of masks. زي ما احنا عارفين دلوقتي الأسعار عالية جدا. Type of masks, either using surgical mask or medical or non-medical mask or ordinary mask or textile mask. طيب نيجي بس عند نقطة برضو تهمنا كثيرا في استخدام الماسك في الكوميونتي. The update now, we have to use masks even within the community, and using masks in the community we can gain some benefits like population protection according to precautionary principle, reducing potential exposure risk, reducing stigmatization of individuals wearing masks or for source control. طيب برضو there is some disadvantages. Self-contamination that can occur by touching and reusing contamination. Not all people well trained for using the mask. استخدام الماسك برضو بطريقة صحيحة مش كل الناس تعرفه. Depending on type of masks used, potential breathing difficulties, false sense or of security leading to potentially less adherence to other preventive measures. بعض الناس لما يلبس الماسك خلاص يعتبر نفسه ان هو في مأمن تام ولا يطبق other precautions like social distancing, like hand hygiene and so on. This is very wrong. Diversion of mask supplies and consequent shortage of masks of healthcare workers. طبعا عندنا اللي بياخد أولوية اللي يستخدم البي بي اي أو الماسك الهيلثكير workers. Diversion of resources from effective public health measures such as hand hygiene. طيب anyways the community use masks has different precautions. I encourage you to read it because we have very limited time. مش عارف الدكتور رجب ممكن نستمر لحد امتى
والله حسب نشاطك يا دكتور وحسب نشاطهم. It's up to you.
اوكي طيب احنا ممكن ان شاء الله نخلص بسرعة بس في الجزئية دي. هنقول البريكوشنز الاخر precautions و strategies recommended by WHO. وكده ان شاء الله نخلص المحاضره بتاعتنا. هضطر اعدي.
ولو انت شايف ان في سلايدز برضو يعني ممكن they can catch by reading you can
Yes.
keep it for them for reading.
اكيد ان شاء الله. الله يحفظك. طيب احنا طبعا قلنا اغلب الكلام اللي احنا كنا عايزين نقوله بالنسبه للستاندرد بريكوشنز والايربورن والدروبلتس بريكوشنز. هنتكلم سريعا على الفاينل ريكومنديشنز واستراتيجيز recommended by WHO. زي ما قلنا standard precautions for all patients not for COVID-19 patients. Screening with dry age, additional transmission based precautions like airborne. زي ما اتكلمنا قلنا هنضيف الايربورن بالنسبه للبريكوشنز والادمنستريتيف كنترولز environmental and engineering tools. طبعا في بعض الاسبكتس مش هتبقى تبعنا زي الادمنستريتيف كنترولز والانجينيرنج كنترولز. نركز شويه على الريكومنديشن الاولانيه اللي هي الستاندرد precautions for all patients. As we mentioned, we apply these precautions for all patients at all times. The main precautions, standard precautions we have mentioned before هنقولها سريع كده. hand hygiene, respiratory hygiene, etiquette, like sneezing in your elbow and so on, using towels or tissues, PPE according to the risks, safe injection practice, sharps, safe handling, cleaning and disinfection of patient care equipment, environmental cleaning, safe handling and cleaning of soiled linen, waste management. All of these precautions we have mentioned في البداية. طيب, the second recommendation, we have to ensure the right triage, error recognition and source control. وده بيساعدنا في اكتشاف الحالات مبكرا والتعامل معها before distribution of infection to others. We have extra precautions that based on mode of transmission, as we mentioned, like direct contact occurs through touching. An individual may transmit microorganisms to other by skin to skin and contact to the surfaces, soil and vegetation. Droplets spread refers to spray and relatively large short range aerosols. Indirect contact or indirect transmission can occur through touching other surfaces and reservoirs. The airborne transmission is highly possible. طيب احنا we will go to the finally to the main conclusion of this session that we have to conclude today. All healthcare workers must fully comprehend the problem of healthcare associated infections, which is highly زي ما احنا عارفين costly, سواء كان economic or health or even يعني lives, must be completely knowledgeable about infection control practices and must personally do everything in their power to prevent health acquired infection from occurring. وزي ما قلنا دورك الأساسي, the main role of you as a trainee or as an internship student or as a healthcare worker or a staff ان انت to adhere, strictly adhere to precautions وتخليها عادة ليك لا يعني تقطعها ابدا وتمارسها باستمرار سواء تواجدك داخل المستشفى او بره المستشفى خصوصا في الاوضاع اللي احنا بنعيشها حاليا. That's all today. يعني hoping احنا يعني get some information and apply إن شاء الله these precautions in our practical life. Thank you very much. جزاكم الله خير. شكرا على الحضور وأشكر دكتور رجب على
شكرا دكتور سامح.
أشكر العفو يا علي وأشكر جميع الزملاء والزميلات.
الله يجزاك خير. ربنا يبارك فيك.
الله يحفظك.
الحقيقة I think it was very informative.